editor and coach. From November 2050 until September 2090, I was deputy managing editor at a magazine, a bi-monthly magazine in Berlin for pop culture, politics, and feminism. And in addition, I have been also a member of the management board of an NGO. And since December, I have been part of the research group on future skills led by Professor Ehlers. Today, I'm your moderator, and we will spend together the next 90 minutes on one topic, as I already mentioned, the future skills, with one speaker that you can already see, Professor Ehlers. You are, you are welcome to raise your questions during the debate in the Zoom chat box, or you also have the Q&A box. And I am happy to collect all your questions and then to submit them to Professor Ehlers. Today, we will be discussing on the hot topic, as already mentioned, of future skills in times of global networked organizations and steadily accelerating product cycles. The model of qualification for future jobs seems debatable. Professor Ehlers will present today the results of 4 years of research on these questions, whether or if we can really prepare graduates and employees for the future by the predominant model of knowledge acquisition, or do we already have adequate concepts for competence development in higher education and work environment? Further webinars or workshops on this topic will follow soon. But now I am pleased to introduce our today's speaker to you. Today we will have the chance to listen and to discuss with one of the key learning innovation experts in Europe. Professor Ehlers is an innovation expert, as mentioned, and serial entrepreneur and professor for educational management and lifelong learning at the Baden-Württemberg Cooperative State University in Karlsruhe, where he held the position of the vice president from 2011 until 2017. He's vice president at the European Association for Institutions of Higher Education and also member of the Executive Council of European Distance and e-learning network, and he's chairing the Bologna Advisory Group for Teaching and Learning. He's also advisor to the University President for Digital Transformation of Teaching and Learning. And for more information, you are invited to visit his website, ulfelers.net. Now that you have learned a little bit about me and about Professor Ehlers, we would like to challenge the group size and also the format here and try to learn more about you. So now we want to know who is here. And for this purpose, a service will be shown, small service will be shown to you, as we can see the first one here, and you are invited to provide us with some information about our audience today. So please give us a short overview of your professional background, please. And
Thank you so far. That's so cool to see so many people logging on these surveys and the numbers going up. That's when we do teaching, actually, this is always an indication, are participants asleep, the students, or are they actually attentive and listening? When you suddenly start a survey and nobody's answering, you know, nobody's listening. So what we can see here, I'm going to close this survey now and show you the results. Here are the results, here they are. What we can see is we have most of you are education professionals, more than half. That is, for example, teachers or media designers or curriculum designers or quality evaluation professionals. We have some students, 5 students, and we have policymakers also, 13, and institutional leaders. So it's quite a good response, I find. It would be great if we could get into a debate now, because these different perspectives are key to finding good solutions to our complex institutional challenges, I think. What else do we want to know, Patricia?
What else do we want to know? So maybe we have to show the next slide. Yeah, right. So how old are you?
What is the age group? Okay, Okay, so we can see 95, 99, 100%. 100 people were replying. I show you the results. So we have most of the participants between 41 and 50. And then between the youngers and the olders, it's distributing fairly evenly. That's very interesting. That's exactly my age cohort, by the way. So welcome. And what else do we want to know? Let's see. From
Yes,
which
we want to know where you come from.
yes. Which region are you currently in, attending the webinar from? Europe or other regions of the world? Okay, so that's absolutely clear. European seminar, European attendance. That's because EURASHE is so well rooted in European countries. I just stop this now and show you the results again. We have one person from Africa. Hello, I would love to know where you come from in Africa. We have 3 from Asia and 1 from the Caribbean. Wow, that's really cool. Good to see that. And then let's see, I think we also have a question, where in Europe do you come from? From which member state? Let's see, we will, okay. Can you see this? You can, yeah. Find your country. It's the game. Is it possible? Nobody's answering. So that means it doesn't work somehow.
So you have different options. There are 3 sections. And you also have the last option is others.
But I think it's not working because nobody's answering the poll. Yeah, no, somebody has started. Cyprus. We have one from Cyprus. I know somebody from Cyprus.
Okay.
And now we have 2, 4. Okay, it's coming through now. Maybe it was a bit difficult to. Okay, we have some 4 people have answered now. 5.
Okay, I understand there is the problem. You have to check one box at least in each section. Unless you cannot submit the answer.
Yeah, of course.
So maybe you have to skip this part of our survey.
We have to skip this part. Okay, well, okay, no problem. We will go back to the meeting. Where do I find my polls now? Here they are. Okay. And I will stop this. But you did great. You did great despite the difficult question and poll logistics. You did great. Okay. So, and that's it, I think, right? That's it for now. Yeah, that's it for now. That's it for now. So we know a little bit, everybody is from Europe, almost, not just everybody, but almost everybody is from Europe. We know the age and we know that we have lots of educational professionals, which makes me feel quite like home because this is exactly what I am actually as well. Okay, Patricia, should we start? What do you think?
Yes, please go ahead, Ulf. I think we're all waiting.
I think I'm going to introduce a bit the masterclass. Thanks for your answers. Just going back quickly, taking a quick glimpse at the agenda which we are looking at today. We have actually distributed or separated our masterclass into 5 parts, 5 short, brief talks, basically. In between, we have the chance to take questions, and we have quite a refined questioning tool here. So questions and answers will be given. If you have problems with the video or the audio connection, you can also let us know in the chat. Of course, we cannot react to every single thing there, but we try to do it as good as possible. Patricia, thank you very much for your kind introduction. You are also going to take care a little bit about the chat and distill the questions from us, and we try to bring them in here. We're going to spend 90 minutes together. You can see the time framing here on the agenda slide. I will tell you a little bit about where you find more about our work, future skills in a nutshell, what are we actually looking at. I will then tell you, for those who are also interested into theory a bit, a short presentation on the context of future skills, setting the scene. Why do we talk about future skills? We're going to have a look at future skills in detail also. Also, I'm going to provide you with a download of our 17 future skill profiles just in 3 minutes. Then we look at the structures behind the future skills, because this is a major part of our work, not just to list future skills, to have a list of compilation list of what is important, but also to see, can from an educational point of view, from an educational science point of view, we identify underlying structures there. And we think we can, and we want to present this to you. And also in part 5, we are going to talk a bit about our current view on how well higher education is doing, actually. So that's the agenda for today. We have a bit of knowledge about who's here, and start with our first chapter. You can say future skills in a nutshell. Future skills is a larger project which is consisting actually of several surveys and studies, a Delphi survey and a qualitative interview study and other surveys, expert screenings of organizations. And the end result is a website which we created, and of course also book publications. And on this website, which you can see here actually, it is nextskills.org. You can find all information of our work. I hope that I'm not demotivating those who are here to listen to our presentations and who might now say, okay, we are going there and downloading everything. But still in our presentation today, we try to give some more insight and background information than you find there. But still what you can see here actually, and that was important for us to show you, is you can download the 17 future skill profiles here directly on the website if you are interested in them. Just to familiarize ourselves a little bit with what are we actually talking about when we are talking about future skills, I would like to show you a short video which we created, and it's in German, but it's subtitled with English, and I'm going to start the video now. Just let me try again to start the video. So let's see. Okay, now it should work.
Es sind Fähigkeiten wie Design Thinking, Sinnhaftigkeit und Sinnstiftung erzeugen zu können. Die Future Skills von morgen, das sind Fähigkeiten wie ethische Kompetenzen, sich verorten zu können, in möglicherweise digital problematischen Szenarien, künstliche Intelligenz einschätzen zu können. Natürlich sind es Digital Literacies, Medienkompetenzen. Es sind aber auch die Fähigkeiten, Entscheidungen zu treffen, Verantwortung zu übernehmen. Es sind Fähigkeiten wie Design Thinking, Sinnhaftigkeit und Sinnstiftung erzeugen zu können. Es sind die Fähigkeiten, sich in Organisationen bewegen zu können, in denen immer mehr das Netzwerk die Regel ist und nicht die strategische Hierarchie, in denen immer weniger Vorgegebenes als Anlass für die eigene Arbeit dient und in dem immer mehr Selbstentwicklung und Selbstorganisation geübt und ausgeübt werden muss. 17 Profile und jedes Profil enthält Bezugskompetenzen, sind also gewissermaßen sind diese Profile Container für und Ausgangspunkte, Gravitationszentren für Fähigkeitsportfolios, die Studierende im Rahmen ihrer Studienerfahrung, ihrer Lernerfahrung entwickeln können.
Okay, so that's a short glimpse into the future skills world a little bit, which we wanted to share with you. We have actually created 8 of these videos for different topics of future skills, 90-second videos, and you can find them on the website, and they are here. Some of them are here, just 3 of them are here, and have a look at them. Also, you can download our publications there. The most recent publication is the one on future skills, learning of the future and higher education of the future, in German with Springer Open Access, or in English, also freely available on the website. Have a look and feel free. We are going to have events, workshops now, of course, online workshops as well, due to Corona situation, but also in the further distance, maybe in December or next year, January, February, some live workshops throughout Europe, and you can find on the website always the current information. Now, enough for giving you some, let's say, links and downloads and book resources. Now let's see, what are we actually talking about? And to be honest, I thought today, of course, how could it be different to start thinking about the Corona situation? And with Corona, what I see with higher education in Germany and in Europe as well is that we are looking at 3 different stages which we are going, or which we're actually going through, or are right in the middle of now. The first one was quite a chaotic stage, quite a chaotic response. Everybody tried to come to terms with suddenly taking thousands of students online, and thousands higher education institutions had to take thousands of colleagues, professors, lecturers, teachers online, and that was in a way a situation in which everybody did what they can to fulfill the needs which they were seeing in front of them. We are now gradually moving more and more towards a phase in which we are trying to structure our response. So it's a phase of structured response now, and we're starting to see how we can pull together systems, for example, technical systems, how we can also start short and medium-term qualification programs for our teachers, how we can bring students into partnerships with our teachers for teaching, how we can build up assessment services. Yeah, assessment in higher education currently is a nightmare when you cannot allow students to come into the lecture halls and take sitting exams. It's quite difficult, and in my university, we have started to experiment with portfolio and open book exams and so on and so on. But it's not something where you can immediately say, okay, this is now going to work. So what we are seeing here is actually this phase of structured response is suddenly starting to question the usual way we are doing it, you know, and we know that we are not looking just at a couple of weeks, but rather at a couple of months, maybe still a year. And I hope that in the third phase, which will take us into the question, what can we take away? So that's the phase of, let's say, strategic analysis of what this crisis situation can also actually do good for the future, where we did have to, let's say, free innovation potentials, which are now starting to be seen and which are starting to be perceived and which we can take into the future. So this will be a phase in which we start to question our current ways and the past ways, in which we try to realign higher education in the light of this new experience. And I would like to invite all of you to form part of this community, actually, wherever you are working in your own institution or in your own country, your region, in your policy context. Let's think about how can we use this crisis, as sad as it is for many of us, actually, and as terrible and awful, but how can we also use this crisis to be a part in time and history in 2020 to start thinking about the future and what can we learn? And one learning for sure is that not just that we need to think about different delivery modes, that we also need to think about what actually do we teach our students, because we can see in this crisis more than ever that creativity, that finding ways of dealing, coping with environmental challenges which are coming to us through external factors are an enormous important asset with students, which are going to be those who are shaping the future, taking the decision of the future, need to learn about. And how can in higher education us be the place where students can learn about this future to deal and cope with these questions? In the light of the magnitude of changes, we often have a reflex, and that's the freeze reflex. We are standing still. But still, what I think we need to start, not just today, we need to start immediately is to change, to think about how can this inform our mindset for the future. The question is, how can we move from talking about it, which we do more and more now, and in the associations which we are representing, for example, in EURASHE, the European Association for Institutes of Higher Education, which is representing PhD, professional higher education institutions throughout Europe, rectors' conference in this field throughout Europe, universities of applied science throughout Europe. In these institutions and in EURASHE, we are starting to build up fora, to build up communities and networks where we are starting to bring people together to talk about this, actually, to talk about our ways of structured response, phase 2, but also the phase of strategic response for the future and how to carry over innovation into higher education, having learned out of this crisis, actually. So how can we come from talking about it to firm actions? And what we can see is that there is a parallel, actually, a parallel to technology. We have talked about technology usage and digital transformation in higher education for the past 20, 30 years, actually, in some parts, in distance education. And what we can see there is actually that we are now having to change, that we are facing a changing master narrative, actually. We are changing the master narrative from using technology to teach in higher education, to discussing the future of the university. And the corona crisis is even accelerating this process of thinking about the future of the university. Of course, we are starting to, we are not questioning the position of the university in our society. It's the oldest institution which we have in Europe, and it's the most stable institution which we have in Europe, apart from the church. But still, the way we are working, this is something we can question a lot. And still, the assumption that students need to come together in one place physically, learn in the same speed, the same things at the same time, and be tested in the same way, the same stuff. This is something which can be challenged, of course, now. And the master narrative will change. We know that crises have also been always in history a place in which technology advancement was accelerated, and at the same time technology often led in history to more prosperous societies, which again allowed themselves and could build up better education systems, which again led to the ability to advance technology. And so Katz and Golden are describing this in their Harvard book very, very nicely in the study. They studied American history of the last 200 years about that, and they were trying to find out what is always actually in the forefront. And they were saying that when technology is in the forefront, usually societies are suffering a little bit, and the Industrial Revolution periods, these are those phases. And then when education comes into the forward, the prosperity of societies are, so to speak, visible. And again, today, of course, with technology, we can see that the internet is actually taking up so much revolutionary advancements and processes that we believe that we are moving again into a phase in which technology takes over. And we can see that maybe not in terms which we would like to use to describe social pain, but we can see that in many, many other disruptions, actually, in the way that we are starting now to negotiate. What does it mean, actually? The internet, digital privacy, data privacy. These are all things where we can see that we are, as humans, are exposed to something we are not used to deal with. And this is something we first need to come to terms with. Another view on this kind of development is one of my very, very dear, actually favorite colleagues, sociologist Dirk Becker from the university in the north of Germany. And he's viewing the technological development through a lens and an analysis grid, which he calls media epochs. He's thinking about media epochs, and he thinks that we are moving through media epochs. First media epoch was when we went from oral to literal conversations with each other, interactions with each other, and then from literal to book printing with each other, and then from book printing now to the internet and to digital technologies. And he's saying that always in these phases, when people started to use language, then when they wrote this language down, then when they could, so to speak, massify written language in form of book print was invented. These were always thresholds over which societies went, and directly afterwards did not have the slightest notion of an idea how to deal with this, what he calls overload of communication possibilities. These are always overloads. Suddenly, when we could write down things, we could fix history, and we could fix cultural heritage, and we could take it on a piece of paper or a piece of clay and could give it somewhere else. It could travel somehow, suddenly it could travel. And these are exactly the same processes, he is convinced, which we are looking now at, and we need to learn to deal with it. And looking at this media epochal thinking of the world's progress, we can see that when it comes to digital technology, we are not yet very far advanced, actually. We are in the beginning or in the middle. And for COVID-19 situation, I have already introduced that I think we are in the middle of the response phase to that, and we are moving towards a strategic response phase in some months probably. And the question is what will stay. And it's also a question where we need to ask ourselves actually, how can we get away from, when it comes to higher education at least, how can we get away from a language of deficit when we talk about digital and online learning? Online learning is not a deficiency form of learning. Online learning is, if it's done in the right way, a very, very artful doing of weaving didactical pedagogical interactions which are very meaningful for students and which can individualize and personalize learning in a really beautiful way, and where we can move away from this paradigm of everyone with the same size has to fit in the same model and, so to speak, classroom. Yeah, what we are talking about actually when we talk about the future is this issue of emergence. And emergence, it's very easy to explain. It's the situation in which we cannot predict the future from knowing the past. So there's no linear way, and COVID is actually a situation in which makes it very clear that we are in the future probably more and more exposed to emergent situations where we do not know how our systems, which we have developed and shaped in our societies, education systems, industrial systems, economic systems, family systems, how they can actually cope. And we need to prepare young people for this emergence. The idea behind this preparation of young people is an idea which is not new, actually. It's called VUCA. VUCA standing for volatility, uncertainty, ambiguity, and complexity. Most of you know this, and the question is, how can this idea of VUCA be taken to conceptualize our response in higher education to a world which is more and more drifting towards emergent behavior? The idea of emergence is self-organization. Systems are self-organizing themselves without external influence from within, actually. Yeah? From which position do we look at the challenge to design higher education? Do we look at higher education from a position in which we think we need to find ways to cope with this or to react? Or do we rather look forward and we're saying, no, we need to design higher education to prepare students for the future? And of course, it is possible to prepare students for dealing with emergent situations. Yeah, to summarize it, actually, the context of what we are looking at when we think about future skills is a little bit put into this image, which we would like to give to you. If you try to blow up an air raft in a very, very narrow box, it's not going to work. Even in today's exponentially changing and shifting world, we still have the tendency to approach the very idea of the future as a static, preordained process that we accept as an inevitable consequence of our past and present. So we have to overcome this in order to get away with situations like this and to think about future skills. Now we have some time for questions. I don't know, Patricia, if you are in the chat following questions. I'm going to look at.
Yes, there is one question from Lucien Bollard. What is your definition of skill next to competence? Just to make sure that we understand each other.
Yeah, I'm going to come to that, and we have, of course, also written in our book extensively about that. We are using the term skill and competence synonymously here. It's a combination of knowledge, skills, and attitudes. And we are using the concept which we call action competence, which is actually a composition, or let's say a concept, which is asking the question, how can students be supported to develop the ability to act competently, successfully in situations which they were not yet prepared for, and in which they have to deal with complex problems. Do we have another question, Patricia?
Yes, we have. Frank Schulte is asking, isn't the idea of implementing a self-sustaining systematic quality management in education, which is not so young, already one possible approach to react to VUCA?
Lucien, I'm sure you would love this question as well, don't you? Lucien has written extensively about quality education, quality management. Frank, yes, only if you embed innovation into your quality management system as an integral characteristics. You can have the most beautiful quality management system, which is steering you completely aside and away from innovation. And you think, wow, we are managing in the boundaries of our criteria and of our indicators, which we have used in the most beautiful way. But these indicators do not match. And that's the big difficulty, I think, to form quality management systems which are open to the outside, actually, which are exposing themselves and the higher education institutions to the outside, and which are thinking to form quality in a way that they are exposing the ideas which you have in higher education to the outside world. And then to ask what is the response from there. Patricia, and one more question, or should we continue and take more questions later?
I think we can just answer to one more, which is Alicia Leonor Sauli Miklavcic. How can we approach future skills management in enterprises as well as in PhD institutions?
Ah, that's a very, very good question. Thank you very much, Alicia. Alicia, much of our study, which we were doing actually, is done in a way, and I will show you this in the next chapter, by going into private enterprises and asking them, what do you think future graduates need to be prepared in order to be able to work in your future enterprise? And we were really, really astonished how creative and how innovative most of these enterprises in which we were, about 20 enterprises in which we did interviews, and about 130 which we were expert screening, how innovative the ways they were approaching already the, let's say, human resource development, professional development of their organization members. They were already very, very innovative. So I think rather it will probably, what we probably need is not a transfer from innovation of competence development in higher education to enterprises, but maybe the other way around, or even better, forming partnerships between the world of work and the world of academic education in, let's say, eye contact to each other. Thank you for this question, Alicia. Okay.
So Frank is insisting, maybe we can come back to it later, but he wants to know, how do we do that?
Okay, I see. Okay, can you note that down? I will think about it while speaking. Frank is always asking complex questions, but that's what is important, I think. So I would like to come to the next chapter, which is the chapter what we call future skills in detail. So this is really about what are these future skills? Okay, what are these future skills? And we would like to not just show the list like it is usually or often done, very much to my dismay, I must say, that today, while there are many future skills approaches out there available, often these are just lists, just listing skills which came out of some kind of survey. And I think it is really important that we always understand when we talk about education, we do not talk about, let's say, a natural forced relationship, but we talk about constructs in which we are setting the agenda and which we base on certain philosophical ideas and concepts. And when it comes to future skills and the envisioning the university of the future, this is exactly the same thing. And we need to explicitize our thinking. We need to explicitize the models. We need to explicitize our philosophical, let's say, assumptions, which we are basing that on. We would like to show you a little bit about the future skills, and we already said that you can download everything. There's not just the 3 books, one of them unfortunately only in German, but there's also a 60-page report from last year, 2019, which is an international Delphi survey, which we call the Future Skills Report. It's here listed in this image as well to download. There are many future skill approaches available. I think we found in our research 47 different approaches. And what we did actually is we were creating an inventory of skills. So that was done in a way that we compiled all skills which we found in these 47 different approaches. We paraphrased them, we deleted doubles, and in the end we came to a list of skills, which you can see here and find also in the book. This is just an excerpt, a small excerpt of this list of skills. And then we tried to take those future skill approaches, which we are believing are comprehensive educational approaches. They all have different names, and you can see here we took the OECD Future Skills Framework, the PISA Key Competence Framework, European Commission Future Education, OECD Key Competencies, OECD Global Competencies, World Economic Forum, 21st Century Skills, and so on. And we try to map which skills are actually in which approach. And also, in the end, the very last one is our future skills approach, which you can see here. And we try to make a mapping and try to also find which competencies, which skills are actually used more often and which are used rather rarely. What we found is that often future skill approaches are focused on digital literacy or special literacy. For example, financial literacy is special literacy. Often we found that they have a strong alignment with employability, especially OECD, World Economic Forum are very strongly aligned to that. UNESCO is more living together and so on. But there's a strong link to economic utilitaristic thinking often. Usually they are not empirically validated. That's also at least an expectation which we try to fulfill with the work we are doing. And usually they are not rooted in education theory or competence concept. In our next skills studies, I told you already that there are several studies, not just one study. which are resulting into the future skills framework. In our next skills studies, we so far did a number of steps. One is that we were starting 4 years ago by calling for concepts, issuing a call for concepts of competence development in organizations. 140 organizations responded from Germany, some multinational organizations, some German, some interregional organizations, and we were starting to assemble expert groups and conduct screenings of the concepts which they were sending in. And we were trying to shortlist 25 of those organizations in which we were finding they had a real advanced thinking of competence development for the future. They had a real advanced tool set and experience of future skills. Our reasoning was that we thought if we want to talk about future skills, what are the most advanced skills, the ways of dealing with the future in terms of qualification skills, competencies, learning? We need to find those places in which the thinking and the conceptualization of this is very advanced. And we need to go there, like going into future laboratories, looking at that and learning from their thinking, actually. We went into that. We did a short list then in the end of 17 different organizations. We went into these organizations over several months, and we were interviewing staff there, responsible staff, HR managers, CEOs, and so on, leaders of the organizations. And then we created a skill inventory, a long list, a huge map of future skills. And while doing that, we were noticing that people were not just talking about future skills, they were also starting to talk about how do future organizations need to look like. And if future organizations look like this, what does it mean for higher education, for students, for graduates? How do they need to be educated in order to help these future organizations to sustain themselves and to develop themselves? What does it mean actually? And they were also talking about leadership concepts. They were thinking and saying and expressing, with the old thinking of leadership, we are not going to go into the new future. And of course, this is something which is almost too banal to say it, but when you're going into today's organizations and you see the creativity they have there, often at least, not always, but often, and what you can really learn from that, it is quite amazing. We took then this skill inventory and we were starting to draft a Delphi survey. And we were conducting a Delphi survey, international Delphi survey, with 50 experts in 2 rounds from all over the world, actually. And we were asking them, how would you phrase these future skill formulations? Because we were formulating future skill proposals in a way. And the experts were responding and they were rephrasing them. They were validating them. And then in the next Delphi round, we were asking the expert, so if these are your future skills, what do you think? How well is higher education actually doing? And we took the results and we documented them in our books and in the documents which we are offering you for download and the publications. This is the design actually of the entire next skills study. You can see at the 17 in-depth interviews, then the Delphi study, 2 Delphi studies, and the expert screening. This is the design of the 2 rounds of Delphi surveys. The first round, you can see here in the bottom, had the intention to clarify concepts and to ask also experts, how probable would you think that this kind of future skill will become important for organizations in the future? And then also we were asking time estimates on time to impact from higher education institutions' readiness. So what do you think, when will these skills become important, will become relevant for higher education institutions? These are our 17 future skill profiles. We are calling them profiles, future skill profiles, because each of these profiles are in itself containing a set of competencies. And they are, so to speak, containers for competencies, which you can also find in the documentation. And altogether, they are creating the map of future skills, which we are, which our studies are resulting in. We were trying to understand, is there actually a structure in between? And we were, after many, many attempts of structuring these future skills, seeing that there was actually a threefold structure which we could apply to this set of 17 skills. And this threefold structure is actually originating from educational thinking. Education, in our understanding, is always a process in which we are building relations between ourselves and the world. So we have the subjective dimension in educational processes, in learning and educational processes. That's the I. But it is at the same time, education is also a process of developing the relation between ourselves and an object. For example, a subject in school, mathematics or physics, or a task which we have to perform. And at the same time also, it is the process of developing the relation between ourselves and the world, the social world, the organizational world. And so we were, so to speak, dimensioning the future skills dimensions and shaping them into a subjective dimension, which is looking into how the individual is asked to perform things in the future. That's the subjective dimension. And future skills which are dealing with this subjective dimension went into this box. We were also at the same time looking at the objective dimension, which is the dimension looking at performance with tasks, with disciplines, shaping disciplines, shaping tasks, shaping, so to speak, work which has to be done, work tasks. And we were looking at our future skills and we were, so to speak, allocating those which are primarily concerned with performing tasks in this box. And the same with world, with the what we call individual organization related skills. And here you can find this allocation in a nice way visualized. We can see that there are skills like autonomous learning competence, personal agility, self-efficacy, self-management, self-initiative, autonomy, tolerance for ambiguity, need or motivation for achievement, ability to reflect, which are forming the subjective dimension. Then we have, of course, digital literacy, which is an important skill. We have, of course, creativity, we have agility, we have this future mindset orientation, which is already the world of work. We have sense making, which is so important. I just talked about it with somebody else today. sense making in an emergent world is one of the key competencies, actually. If you're constantly set in different environments, which are constantly self-organized, changing, you need this developed ability to make sense out of this context. And then we have cooperation competence and communication competence. And you see that probably for you there are many familiar ones, but maybe also some which you would rather feel funny about, maybe about the formulation. We were, so to speak, taking the liberty a little bit for formulating container skill labels, which are then in itself again containing other futures, other skills, which are consisting of other skills. Now asking a question to you actually. Think about your own, the teachers of you, think about your own classroom as a student. Think about yourself as a professional learner, or think about as yourself as a student also. And now look at these skills which we have listed here, and think about which skills make a, so to speak, a mental game for yourself. Which are the skills in which I am already quite educated, where I feel actually quite familiar, where me, for myself, I would say, yeah, this is actually something where I have already developed quite a competence, quite a professional competence maybe. And you can also think a little bit about what was the real threshold which brought me there. What was this, what we call the threshold experience, which I had to go over, which I had to cross in order to develop this? What made me really learning literate, really self-efficient, really self-determined, really self-competent? What gave me my sense of ethical conviction? How did I become an innovative person? Am I an innovative person? Think about it. And then now we would like to share again a poll with you, which I think is this one. No, it's this one. Or it is this one, yeah. We've just actually by randomly selected 10 of these 17 competence profiles, and we would like to ask you which future skills would you like to explore in your classroom, be it as a student, a professional learner, or a teacher. Let's go. Tell us. I think everybody can choose one. I'm not sure, actually. Maybe it's possible to choose more than one. I'm not sure. We've just chosen 10, and the reason was that Zoom is not allowing for more than 10. Which is a pity, of course, but that's okay. And everybody is just forced to choose one, actually. And we have now 75 persons which have taken the survey. Maybe we wait until 90. Some of you probably need to read through it and really think about what does it mean. Tolerance for ambiguity, okay. We have 80 now and slowing down a little bit. So I think that maybe 81, 82, 83, maybe I'm going to stop the poll here of 109 and I'll show you results. So number one is creativity, actually, with 21% saying creativity I would like to explore more. Future mindset, 19%. and creativity together make up 40%. And then we have autonomous learning competence and sense making and tolerance for ambiguity. Yeah, so that's quite interesting. Thank you very much. As I said, you can download these future skill profiles here and have a look at it. Each future skill profile is coming with a definition, with a description of why it is relevant, with a description of which competencies are sub-competencies, and with some literature in which they are defined. To round the picture a little bit, we believe that, of course, action cannot be separated. Action is actually an interplay always between these three dimensions. And what I know about myself when in education I develop the relation to myself will always influence my view, outlook, and ability which I have to deal with certain objects. And this again is interrelated with my ability and the relation which I have with my social world. So these three dimensions are actually interrelated. And that's why we developed this triple helix idea in which we are saying in the future organization, students, graduates, members of organizations of our society actually will have to act in highly complex situations for which they cannot be trained just through knowledge transmission. They need to be trained to really act in a competent way. And a competent way to act in the future, acting in a highly emergent context in the future, consists actually of abilities, of skills in the three different categories, dealing with the social world, myself, and an object. So this has to be combined. The competence to act in future unknown and highly emergent professional and private contexts is a result of combining interdependent skills in these three areas. We are currently building a skill map and a skill finder so that on the web you can click on a skill and then you can find the definition and the description, but also in the future good practice, how to implement this actually in our organizations. And now I come again to the end, and before I go back to Patricia and ask about the questions which have maybe been asked, I would like to challenge all of us to do a 60-second relaxation. I'm going to take my watch, okay, and start the timer. The idea is let's freely associate together. Use the chat window for that. Put your associate words into the chat. We're going to have 60 seconds. Let's all look at the chat. Let's be visionary, colorful, and experimental. So go to the chat and type into the chat window, what do you think about when you hear the term future skills? What do you think about when you hear the term future skills? Write into the chat the first term you think about. Read what others write. Let's go. 60 seconds. Time is running. About time. Light. Very interesting. Okay, thank you very much. That was 60 seconds of free associating. Super. Thank you very, very much. Thank you very much. Very, very interesting. I don't know if you had the chance to really look at it, but from this association, you can already see from which different corners we approach this subject. For some of you, it is dealing with advancing society. For some of you it's dealing future skills should result into graduates which are advancing our economy. And maybe both can go together and is not excluded mutually. But what needs to be created is actually a dialogue of those 2 or 3 or 4 different stakeholder groups coming to a table. And we need this dialogue. And that's again something which I said at the beginning. EURASHE and the institutions it stands for, the rectors' conferences, the professional higher education institutions, we really need to engage into a dialogue about the future. We are the universities. It is not somebody else. We are the universities. We make the universities. The universities are self-governed, largely self-governed entities, and we need to create the future. We need to participate in this exercise. I'm at the end of my chapter about future skills now, and I would like to ask again, Patricia, do we have some questions which we can take? Let's say 3 or 4 questions.
Okay, we have 9.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, there's one question from Ghazi Asafa, who wants to know, one important ingredient of education is assessment. Can you elaborate on the future of e-assessment in different sectors, e.g. health, applied sciences?
It's on e-assessment.
Right.
Yeah, I think that that's still a big question, of course, how to assess and how to think about. I mean, we are today coming together to think about future skills. So the question is really, do we want to talk about how to bring the assessment concepts which we have today into the reality of the digital room? Maybe we really need to think about a radical way of reforming assessment. A bachelor student today has 28 or 25 modules in 3 or 4 years of his bachelor student studies. For each module, which is 5 ECTS minimum, he or she has one assessment actually. So in 3 years, 6 semesters, you have about 30 exams. That's 5 per semester. That's quite a lot actually. And the practice is that these module exams are split up into 2 or 3 units, so that doubles or triples even. And in my view, what we need is we need to cut down exams by more than 50%. We need to come to 8 exams, which are oral, which are written, which are practical, which are really getting students into reasoning. And this is a completely different attitude, I think. And some of that can be maybe digital, and some of that can be also, or has to be then also in a, let's say, live interaction.
Okay, there was another question that is maybe a bit related to what you just said, which is not e-assessment, but e-learning, and how it can be, what can one adequately develop advanced social skills in an online environment? Maybe this can relate, so we can skip this question.
That's yeah, but sorry, yeah.
Or do you want to answer?
Yeah, I want to answer because
Okay.
there's a big misconception about e-learning. E-learning, and we all have our mental images about e-learning. Some of us have the mental image about e-learning that e-learning is just a logistic, different way of distributing learning materials. So that means we are using digital infrastructure to transfer the slides, the knowledge, the whatever lectures on video to our students. And some of us have totally different images, mental images, and think that e-learning actually is a way to engage students into interactions which are not possible in the classroom. And when you think about e-learning in this way, to engage students into interactions which are not possible, then you start to think about e-learning as a means to individualize and to personalize learning. And personalizing and individualizing learning, that's exactly the pathway to future skills and competence development.
Okay, we have another question from Katalin Sondi. I find it very difficult to make students understand how important future skills are. Are there any initiatives to start raising awareness in schools? In my case, they often come from very traditional settings in school.
You are right. I think I have two answers in my head. One is think about different terms. Don't call it future skills, call it differently. Think about terms which are engaging and involving students, which they think, yeah, that is actually cool, that we should learn that actually. Yeah, we should learn to convince somebody, of course. Yeah, we should be learning to be, and so on. And the second one is future skills also asks for changing education, higher education or school education. And that's always difficult to change paradigms. And that's why I think we need to work more on showing good examples. And that's in my research group, actually, in the next education group. It's called Next Education. In my research group, we are actually working on this issue now. We are thinking about how to develop educational concepts, which are, and finding them also, because they are already out there, and highlighting them and making them available.
Okay, I want to try to answer two questions. Now. The first one, are some of the 70 skills hierarchical? So do you need one to access others? And the other question is, maybe linked to it, where do you see links and differences between the 70 future skills profiles and the 50 key competences of the EU Entrecom framework? On a quick review, it seems that there are many similarities.
Yeah, that's also very, very important. I mean, while I think that there are similarities, there are also differences. I think what is important to understand is that the future skills work which we do, or the DigiComp Edu framework, or whatever else you take, and I showed you this analysis of different future skill concepts. I think what is important to understand is we all are not inventing the concept of competence or skill in a new way. We are not initiatives which are developing skills, understandings, or concepts. We are compiling ideas of how and which skills should be selected for the future. And if you think about that and you ask yourself, how did they do that actually, these different initiatives? How did they come to their understanding of the future, to the profile of selecting competencies which for the future are important? And secondly, how did they actually compose a framework which gives a holistic understanding of an educational idea behind it? Then I think you can start to find the differences there. But of course, we all want that future graduates are going to be digitally literate, of course. Some of the frameworks even are also emphasizing ethical competence. Some others are even emphasizing self-determined learning competencies. But then look at the specificities and look at the intentions of these frameworks, and you will find differences. And the very, very ultimate goal of the framework which we have created is to equip students to deal with unforeseen complex problems in the future world. And it is our intention to outline what are the steps which they can do in order to arrive there.
Okay, there are some questions left, but we only have 10 minutes left. So
Okay.
do you want to go ahead with your presentation?
Yeah,
or with questions?
No, I'm going to go ahead with the presentation.
Okay.
I'm going to skip one chapter, that is chapter 4. That's about underlying structures and the theory behind the future skill model. Because I felt that now, with the short time we have left, we should rather look a little bit about higher education. Just some slides about it. What we did was very interesting, but not very significant in terms of research. We were in the Delphi survey asking the 50 experts from all over the world, so look at these competencies, these 17 competencies, and you can see them here separated into the 3 dimensions. Look at these 17 competencies and tell us, how important do you think they are for higher education on a scale from 1 to 5? And then tell us, secondly, how well do you think higher education is doing? And since we asked such a diverse group of people, of experts coming from different countries, different regions of I think even all different regions of the world, also from different positions, some teachers, some policymakers, some institutional leaders, some researchers. This is not significant for Europe or for Germany or for one higher education sector. Absolutely not. But on the overall, we can all ask ourselves, looking at these results, what is actually our estimate of how well do we do? And you can see here that the light blue bars represent the estimation of how well higher education is doing, whereas the dark blue bars are representing the answers which were estimating how important the different skills were. So you can see that there is always a big gap, and that's across the board, of course. And that's where we were starting to think that probably the skills which we were selecting when they are important and not yet implemented in higher education. And again, that's just an average. It's something we really have to work on more, to find methods and measures to diagnose higher education institutions, to help them also to find maturity models and progression models. But you can see here that, of course, it's quite relevant to have a look at these answers and to see that across the board, higher education experts are thinking that these different future skills are important and relevant, but are not yet reached far enough in higher education. The last section I would like to talk about for, let's say, 3-4 minutes, and then we can also end our seminar, our masterclass today with some questions, is the question, how will higher education develop? And in our research, we identified what we call the 10 seconds of higher education. The 10 seconds are the 10 drivers of higher education for the future. You can look at the research which has been compiled in the book publications. And we were developing from there 4 scenarios. And these 4 scenarios for future higher education again went to the experts, and the experts were assessing the validity, the plausibility, and also the time for which it will take until when they become relevant. And what you see here is the time estimation of experts. They were saying that these four components of a vision of the future higher education institutions carry different notions of radical, let's say, change. And that's why also they will probably take different time frames until they become really alive in higher education. But what you can see here is that 3 of them at least have a focus point on about 10 years estimation. One is called the Future Skills University Scenario, which is not just what we talk about now. It is really a radical turn away from knowledge transmission, turn to competence development. And competence is not something excluding knowledge, it's including knowledge, but it's a knowledge plus concept. And we need to work on this plus. We need to bring higher education, teaching and learning into the trajectory of this plus, knowledge plus of competence. That's very, very important. That's the first scenario. The second scenario is the networked multi-institutional study scenario. Today's students are enrolling in University A and they are graduating from University A. In the future, students will enroll in University A and then will embark on a journey, a learning journey through institutions, through schools, through faculty. And we need to make that happen. Tomorrow we have a webinar on micro-credentials. Micro-credentials, I think at the same time, are actually the methodology which we need to allow this network multi-institutional study scenario. The third scenario is the My University scenario. It is the scenario in which students are enrolling and are not presented with a ready-made curriculum. They are presented with a choice. They are presented with the question, what are you interested in? How can we help you? They are coached through a phase of curriculum building, which is then validated with experts and teachers. It's not a blind study, it's an informed personal study. And that's where we need to go for the future. And only digital technology will allow this actually, because the individualization process, which is underlying this scenario, can only be supported through digital technology in a meaningful way, not through brick and mortar institutions. And the fourth scenario is the lifelong learning, higher learning scenario, which is a scenario which is turning around the understanding of our higher education scenario today. Today, we think that bachelor and master is the focal point of academic education, and afterwards, academic education is phasing out. In the future, what we are going to look at is a preliminary academic phase of allowing students to enter their work phase, and then an increasing trajectory of academic education throughout the journey which they take, the biographical education, episodical journey throughout their life. So these are the 4 scenarios. And what we can say now is good practices are actually very, very much in demand. And what would be really, really beautiful, and I'm sure that everybody of you has their favorite scenario, their favorite university, their favorite school, which they know. If you have this, a website, a literature link, a person, a name, please send it to us through the chat or through email. Send it to us, share it with us. We will compile this list and we will share it back as part of the slide deck with everybody here in our group, in our still large group, actually. Yeah, the finishing line, actually, and we need to finish on time, is to look at some quotes. And I think one of the really, really nice and expressive quotes of Alvin Toffler is putting it into a good light. He's saying, in a time of exploding change, asking the very largest of questions about our future is not merely a matter of intellectual curiosity, it is a matter of survival. Thank you very much for your attention. And Patricia, I think we have time for one more question, maybe.
Yes, right. So maybe we can try to combine two questions again, which is a question regarding how to cope with differences between communities or between countries. For example, low resources communities or differences between different countries in Europe, how to cope with these regarding future skills.
Yeah, I think that the matter of coping with differences is super important. It's a matter of social inclusion. And what we know today is that social inclusion is not the opposite of excellence. Social inclusion is the concept, which is the stage on which excellence can grow, actually. And we have so many examples of people coming from all walks and kinds of lives and situations, which are today leading figures and opinion leaders, stimulating our societies and economy. And we need to deal with differences and diversity in a way in which we are embracing diversity and differences, so that we all can learn from each other, because our mutually different perspectives are those which we need to have a clear view on this world. I think that's it, right? We have no more time. We need to stop because another webinar is coming up here from EURASHE. You are all invited to stay, of course. On behalf of EURASHE, as the Vice President of EURASHE, I would like to thank you for your attendance. I would like to thank Patricia Bonoro for moderating. You have been a wonderful moderator. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
I would like to thank also Dovile and Francesca for their organization and for making this actually possible. Would like to thank EURASHE for allowing the space. This actually today should have been our annual conference. We didn't make it due to Corona, but I think we could share some wonderful time. We have moved the conference, so you will be able to attend the conference, hopefully in winter 2020, and then we can maybe have an opportunity to meet face to face. So thank you very much. We are now off, switching off, pulling the plug, and wish you a nice afternoon.